Hey Kingdom Pen fans, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Josiah DeGraff, the editor-in-chief of KingdomPen.org, and today I'd like to answer the question on if self-publishing is a viable option for writers. Now, when I first heard about self-publishing 7 or some years ago, I didn't think that was actually a legitimate option for writers. After all, at the time, it seemed like it was mostly for people whose works weren't good enough to get traditionally published. Seemed a bit like that sort of thing where if you didn't get traditionally published, then you just resort to being self-published instead, and so as a result, self-published works tended to be works that didn't have very good book covers, didn't have very good editing, and didn't have very good stories. As a result, it didn't seem to be a viable option for serious writers. However, over the past 7 years, self-publishing has changed a lot and has dramatically shaped the industry to the extent that today I think it is a very viable option for newer writers to look at, and even for more experienced writers to look at. So today I'd like to explain 4 reasons why I think self-publishing is a viable choice that you may want to consider. The first reason I believe it's viable is that it doesn't have the stigma that it used to. Back when self-publishing first really began, when Amazon began to allow writers to be self-published on their store, it seemed like that the only writers that were being published there were those who weren't good enough to become traditionally published. However, not only have more good writers begun to write self-published works, but many big-name authors who began traditionally published are now moving to the self-publishing world. In the realm of Christian fiction, Brian Davis and Wayne Thomas Batson are 2 authors, both of which began traditionally published, and both of which have pretty good followings, and both of them have turned to self-publishing to publish some, if not all, of their books going forward at this point. And they're not the only ones. Many other writers, both in the Christian and the secular markets, have done very well self-publishing to the extent that now self-publishing is viewed as a professional option for experienced writers. As long as you present yourself professionally then, self-publishing is no longer the stigma that it used to be in the writing world. The second reason that self-publishing has become a viable option is that it's easier to control your audience. In traditional publishing, it's harder to know who exactly is reading your book since it's just the people who tend to buy it at the bookstore. And even if they get it through the digital formats of Kindle and Apple, there are just less resources that are available to authors to see who exactly are buying their books. Today, though, in digital self-publishing, you now have the access to have tools through these online sites to see what demographics are buying your books so that you can learn the best ways to reach the demographic that your books are being marketed toward. Now, it does take work and it does take research, but when done effectively, you can be a very effective marketer and can more easily control your audience if you go the self-publishing route. The third reason to go the self-publishing route is that it's simply easier to make a living off your writing as a writer. And this comes down to royalties. If you're traditionally published, you're generally only going to get between 10 to 20% of the published price of the book. If it's being sold for $10, you may get $1 to $2 for each book sold. However, in self-publishing, the dynamic is totally different. Instead of getting only 10 to 20% of the book price, you instead can get up to 70% if you're doing it through a site like Amazon. This is huge, and this means that you don't need to sell quite as many books in order to be self-published and be successful and make a living as a writer. As a result, if you self-publish because of the increased royalties, it can be a more effective route if you want to make a living. Finally, the last reason that self-publishing has become a viable option is because you have more creative control. If you're looking to be traditionally published and you're trying to publish a book that's in a niche and isn't as widely accessible to the general public, it's going to be harder to publish your book because publishers tend to doubt that books that are published in niches really have a large enough audience to be worth their time. However, many self-published writers have been able to discover large enough audiences in their niches to be able to build these audiences because they have the creative control and because they have the ability to specifically target those audiences with the tactics we discussed in point number 2, that's easier to control your audience. In addition to this, self-publishing can be more attractive because you do have control over what cover it has. You don't need to be forced to make creative decisions for your book that you don't like, and there are many other creative options that you simply have more control of if you go the self-publishing route. For these 4 reasons, I believe that self-publishing has become a viable option in today's world. And we don't need to view it anymore as a question of are you going to be traditionally published or are you going to be self-published. In fact, many authors today have gone the hybrid route, where they traditionally publish some books and self-publish authors. As a result, my advice to newer writers is if you are able, pursue both books at once. Try stuff out in the self-published world and try to be traditionally published and figure out what works for you. Now, all this may lead to a question. Self-publishing may be a viable option today, but how do you do it well? And how can you make sure your books are sold? And how can you write a good self-published work? You need to know how to do it right, so I'd like to share with you an opportunity that we're presenting through Kingdom Pen. This upcoming Monday, on July 3rd at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're having 3 self-published authors come on live to do a live panel discussion on the site. In this panel discussion, the 3 authors will be up on video cam and will be talking about their different practices and what their experience has been self-publishing. But for the majority of the time, they will be answering any question that you submit via chat at that event. I'm really excited, and we're going to have the 3 self-published authors there. So we're going to have Kim Vandal, Rachel Rittenhouse, and Jeanette DeLuey, all of which have self-published their works, and all of which I think have a lot of valuable knowledge they can share with you on how to be self-published successfully. If you want to join the discussion, all you need to do is go to kingdompen.org/self-publishing and register for the live panel discussion there. So then on Monday, we'll be sending you the link so that you can join the panel discussion and learn from our authors. So, if you want to learn about self-publishing, go to kingdompen.org/self-publishing to learn from these more experienced writers on why, once you believe that self-publishing is a viable choice, then how you can move from that to actually implement it successfully so that you can be a successful published author.